Hello students, in this class I am going to discuss about the structural organization of proteins. So last class we saw that proteins are made up of amino acids, right? So in this class we can see how these amino acids are connected together to form the various protein structures. So what are the different levels of structural organization? Yes, the different levels are primary, secondary, tertiary and quaternary. So these are the different levels of structural organization of proteins and we can see one by one. The structure of proteins can be primary, secondary, tertiary and quaternary. Okay, so primary structure, it mainly consists of sequence of amino acids. So it is a linear sequence of amino acids in primary structure, and secondary structure is a local folding of the polypeptide chain into helices or sheets. Okay, secondary structure mainly consists of the helices and the sheets. Tertiary structure is the three-dimensional folding pattern of the protein, mainly due to the side chain interactions. So, the tertiary structure is a three-dimensional folding of protein, and quaternary structure consisting of more than one polypeptide chains. Okay, so these are the various structural organization of proteins we can see one by one. So moving on to the primary structure. So what is the primary structure? It is a linear sequence of amino acids. Okay, just like beads connected on a string, the amino acids are linked together to form the primary structure. So the linear sequence of amino acids. Linear sequence of amino acids. And what are the bonds involved in primary structure? It is a peptide bond. So peptide bond is involved in the primary structure of the protein, and peptide bond is a type of covalent bond. Okay, the strong covalent bonds are involved in primary structure. And this amino acid sequence determines the 3D structure of protein. So this amino acid sequence determines the 3D structure of protein. So important points you have to remember about primary structure. It is a linear sequence of amino acids. The bonds involved are the covalent peptide bonds, and this amino acid sequence determines the 3D structure of protein. This is the structure of insulin. Okay, insulin, the human insulin. So about structure of insulin, it consists of two polypeptide chains. There are two polypeptide chains, meaning many amino acids, right? So more than 10 amino acids. So it's a polypeptide. So two polypeptide chains. There is A chain and B chain. A chain consisting of 21 amino acids and B chain consists of 30 amino acids. So insulin has total 51 amino acids. Okay, A chain consisting of 21 amino acids and B chain consisting of 30 amino acids. And you can see these yellow lines. What are these yellow lines? These are the disulfide linkages. Okay, disulfide linkages. The disulfide linkages are involved in insulin between 6th and 11th amino acid of A chain. Okay, A chain between 6th and 11th of amino acid of A chain, and between 7th amino acid of A chain and 7th amino acid of B chain there is interchain disulfide linkages, and 20th amino acid of A chain and 19th amino acid of B chain there is another intersulfide disulfide linkages. Okay, so two interchain disulfide linkage and one intrachain disulfide linkage is involved in insulin. Between 6th and 11th amino acid of A chain, and between 7th amino acid of A chain and 7th amino acid of B chain, and 20th amino acid of A chain to 19th amino acid of B chain. So these are the various bonds involved in insulin. Fine. And the first hormone about insulin, it is the first hormone to be extracted. Who discovered this? Who did this? It's by Banting and Best. Okay, so this is a first protein that is discovered. And about the various species variation insulin, the porcine and the human insulin vary only in the terminal amino acid of B chain. Okay, in humans the 30th amino acid is threonine, whereas in bovine and pigs the 30th amino acid is alanine. Okay, so species variation, it is alanine in bovine and pigs, and it is threonine in humans. Fine. And the other chain, in A chain, the species variation in insulin restricted to 8, 9 and 10 in A chain. Okay, 8, 9 and 10 in A chain, and C-terminal amino acid of B chain. Fine. So in humans it is threonine, and it is bovine and pigs it is alanine. Fine. So the important points that you have to remember, It's connected by the disulfide linkages. So intra-chain disulfide linkage is seen between 6th and 11th amino acid of A chain, and interchain disulfide linkages is between 7th amino acid of A chain to 7th amino acid of B chain and 20th amino acid of A chain to 19th amino acid of B chain. Species variation, 30th amino acid of B chain is threonine in humans, and it is alanine in bovine and pigs. So these are the important points that you have to remember about insulin, right? Okay, now let's see about the secondary structure of protein. So primary structure, it is mainly the linear sequence of amino acids, whereas in secondary structure, the examples are alpha helix and beta sheets that shows the configurational relationship of amino acid residues which are about 3 to 4 amino acids apart in linear sequence. Okay, so it shows the configurational relationship of residues of 3 to 30 amino acid residues which are 3 to 4 amino acids apart in linear sequence. And the bonds involved in the secondary structure are mainly non-covalent bonds, whereas in primary structure it is the covalent peptide bonds which is the main bond, but in secondary structure non-covalent bonds are involved. Which are the non-covalent bonds that you know? The main important bond in secondary structure is a hydrogen bond. Hydrogen bond is the most important bond that is seen in the secondary structure, and the other bonds that is involved are the hydrophobic bonds, then electrostatic bonds like ionic bond, then salt bridges, ionic bond, then van der Waals forces. Okay, so these are the bonds involved in the secondary structure. Main important point that you have to remember is that the non-covalent bonds are involved in the secondary structure, whereas in primary structure covalent bonds are involved. And the examples for secondary structure includes alpha helix and beta sheets. Okay, so secondary structure involves the configurational relationship of amino acids which are about 3 to 4 amino acids apart in linear sequence, and the bonds involved are the non-covalent bonds. The alpha helix structure that is seen in the secondary, that is the most common and stable secondary structure. It's a question for you. The most common and stable secondary structure is the alpha helix. Okay, and the structure is involved mainly by intra-chain hydrogen bonds. So you can see the intra-chain, within the chain there are many hydrogen bonds. So these are the bonds stabilizing the alpha helix. So hydrogen bond is involved in the alpha helix between first and the fourth amino acid. Okay, the carbonyl oxygen of the first and fourth amide nitrogen of the fourth amino acid. Okay, the carbonyl oxygen of first amino acid and the amide nitrogen of fourth amino acid. So this OH bonds are involved. OH hydrogen bonds are the main bond stabilizing the alpha structure. And each turn is formed by 3.6 amino acid residues. Okay, 3.6 amino acid residues are involved in each turn, and the distance of one turn of alpha helix, is 0.54 nanometer. The distance of one turn of alpha helix, which is called as the pitch. So pitch of alpha helix, the distance of one turn of the alpha helix is called as a pitch, and it is 0.54 nanometer. Okay, and proline can only be stably accommodated with the first turn of alpha helix. Examples of proteins whose major secondary structure is alpha helix include hemoglobin and myoglobin. So hemoglobin and myoglobin are the important proteins which have alpha helix structure, and each turn of alpha helix is formed by 3.6 amino acid residues, and the pitch of alpha helix is 0.54 nanometer. And proline can only be stably accommodated within the first turn of alpha helix. So here the important points that you have to remember is that alpha helix is the most common and the stable secondary structure. The bonds involved is hydrogen bonds between carbonyl oxygen and amide hydrogen of the fourth amino acid. Between first and fourth amino acids, the hydrogen bonds are involved, which are the major bonds involved in the alpha helix. Pitch of alpha helix, that is the distance of one turn of alpha helix, is 0.54 nanometer. The amino acid residues involved is 3.6 amino acid residues, and examples with alpha helix are hemoglobin and myoglobin. These proteins have major alpha helix. Their major structure includes alpha helix. Right? The second most common, which are recognizable regular secondary structure is the beta sheets. So beta sheets is the second most common. The first common is alpha helix and the second most common is the beta helix. So here the polypeptide chain is almost fully extended. Okay, it is fully extended and they have a zigzag or pleated pattern. Okay, zigzag or pleated pattern is seen in the beta sheets. Here it is interchain hydrogen bond. So between the chains there is interchain hydrogen bonds are involved in the beta sheets. Okay, and they can be run in the same direction or opposite direction. Okay, parallel. These hydrogen bonds can be of same direction or opposite direction. That shows parallel or anti-parallel. Okay, fine. And the examples of proteins whose major structure is beta sheet is parallel beta sheet. Parallel beta sheets is involved in, what is the example? Flavodoxin. Flavodoxin has parallel beta sheet, and anti-parallel beta sheet includes silk fibroin. Okay, anti-parallel example is silk fibroin. Parallel is flavodoxin, anti-parallel is silk fibroin, and both parallel and anti-parallel. Example is carbonic anhydrase. The enzyme carbonic anhydrase has both parallel and anti-parallel beta sheets. Okay, so in alpha helix it is the intrachain hydrogen bond which is parallel to the peptide bond. In beta chain it is the interstrand hydrogen bond which is perpendicular to the peptide bond. So it is perpendicular to the peptide bond in beta sheet, whereas in alpha helix you can see the hydrogen bonds is parallel. Okay, the hydrogen bond is parallel to the peptide bond. Fine. Whereas in beta sheet it is perpendicular to the peptide bond, and the beta sheets can be parallel, anti-parallel or both. Parallel and beta sheet is seen in flavodoxin, anti-parallel beta sheet is seen in silk fibroin, and both parallel and anti-parallel is seen in carbonic anhydrase. It is a second most common secondary structure. Which is the first common secondary structure? It is the alpha helix. And examples of alpha helix proteins are hemoglobin and myoglobin. So the anti-parallel beta sheets were the strands run in opposite direction. Okay, here the strands run in opposite direction, that is anti-parallel beta sheet. An example of anti-parallel beta sheet is silk fibroin. Okay, these dashed lines consist of hydrogen bonds which is perpendicular to the peptide bonds. Parallel beta sheets, the sheets running in same direction. Examples of parallel beta sheet is, which is example? It is flavodoxin. Flavodoxin protein has parallel beta sheets, both parallel and anti-parallel. That is seen in example is carbonic anhydrase. Okay, so in beta sheet the bonds involved is hydrogen bonds between interchain. Okay, it's not within the chain, between adjacent chains. So interchain hydrogen bonds is involved in beta structure and intrachain hydrogen bonds is involved in the alpha structure. Now other form of secondary structure is the turns and bends. It's also called beta turns and beta bends. So the short segments of amino acid that join two units of secondary structure. So beta turn, it involves 4 amino acid residues. First amino acid residues is hydrogen bonded. So first amino acid residue is hydrogen bonded to fourth amino acid, resulting in a tight 180-degree turn. Okay. So first and fourth, these are involved and they result in a tight 180-degree turn. Okay. So proline and glycine are most involved in the beta turn. The amino acids involved in the beta turn is proline and glycine between first and fourth. There is a 180-degree turn. Fine. And it involves what? The short segments of amino acid that joins two units of secondary structure. So this is an example for a beta turn. The main amino acids involved are proline and glycine. Okay. Now coming to reverse turns and loops. So unlike turns, these loops consisting of long segments. They consist of long segments of amino acids that joins the two secondary structures. Okay. Now let's discuss about the amino acids involved in these various secondary structures. In case of alpha helix, the amino acids involved are alanine, glutamate, methionine, and leucine. These amino acids favor alpha helix formation, of which methionine is the most common. When it comes to beta sheet, the most common amino acid that is involved in beta sheet is, in cases, it is valine. Okay, so in beta sheets, the valine and isoleucine are present in the beta strands. And the most abundant amino acid in beta sheet is valine. Okay, and the amino acid that is least present in alpha helix as well as beta sheet is proline. So proline is mainly seen in beta turns. So most common amino acid in turns is proline. Okay, in turns proline and glycine is involved. But these proline and glycine disrupt alpha helix. Okay, and some amino acids like valine, isoleucine, and threonine, they do not favor alpha helix formation. So amino acids involved in alpha helix formation include alanine, glutamate, methionine, and leucine. And in beta sheets, it is valine and isoleucine, and proline and glycine are present in turns. Now the example for super secondary structures. So super secondary structure, it means the secondary structural elements, they join to form the super secondary structures. And examples are the beta alpha beta motif, then Greek key motif, beta meander motif, and beta barrels. So these are examples for super secondary structure. That is a grouping of secondary structural elements. These are called the motifs. So you should remember these examples: beta alpha beta motif, Greek key motif, beta meander motif, and beta barrel. These are examples for super secondary structures. So this is the hierarchical organization of protein structure. So secondary structure main involved are alpha helix and beta strands, and super secondary structure involves alpha hairpin, beta alpha beta, and beta beta, the beta hairpin, and motifs. The super secondary structures are 4 helical bundle, 4 alpha helical bundle, then Roseman fold, that is important for your exam, which consists of beta alpha beta strands, and beta beta beta, that is involved in beta meander, and Greek key consists of the 4 beta strands. So this is the hierarchical organization of protein structure. Now these are the DNA binding domains. These are examples for superstructure, super secondary structure, and some examples are helix turn helix motif, then leucine zipper. So leucine zipper is another example for secondary structure. There is a leucine zipper. Then helix loop helix, and zinc finger. These are the super secondary structures that is involved in DNA binding. Okay, so the DNA binding motif, the first motif described is the helix turn helix motif. Helix turn helix. Okay, helix turn helix. That is the first super secondary structure that was described. The second DNA binding domain that is found is zinc finger, and the DNA binding motif which requires zinc for its activity is zinc finger. So zinc finger requires zinc. Then DNA binding motif with leucine residue. So with leucine residue is a leucine zipper. So here you should remember these things. The helix turn helix motif, that was the first DNA binding motif that was found, that was discovered. And second one is zinc finger, which requires zinc, and leucine zipper. It contains leucine residues at every 7th position. Okay, leucine residue. Leucine is present at every 7th residue. So these are the various DNA binding domains. Now coming to the tertiary structure. So the entire three-dimensional conformation of the polypeptide, that is referred to as tertiary structure. And the amino acid sequence in the primary structure, determines the 3D structure of protein. Okay, that determines the 3D structure of protein. The amino acid sequence in the primary structure determines the 3D structure of a protein. Now let's discuss about a domain. So what do you mean by domain? Domain is a section of the protein structure. Okay, it is a section of protein structure which performs a particular task, a particular physical or chemical task, such as binding of a substrate, such as binding of a substrate. So domain is a section of a protein structure. So the given diagram is that of Roseman fold, and is seen in the class family of oxidoreductases. So Roseman fold is seen in the enzyme class oxidoreductases. And lactate dehydrogenase is one of the family of oxidoreductase that shares a common N-terminal NAD binding domain. So NAD binding domain is seen in Roseman fold. And the main example, that enzyme that is containing this Roseman fold, is lactate dehydrogenase. So this is a common question. Roseman fold, the NADP binding domain is seen in enzymes like lactate dehydrogenase, and other enzymes involved are alcohol dehydrogenase. They consist of beta alpha motif. Okay, beta alpha motif is seen in the Roseman fold, and they contain of NADP binding domain, and these are seen in class of enzymes oxidoreductases. Which enzyme class is oxidoreductase? It is class 1. Okay, right? So enzymes like lactate dehydrogenase, alcohol dehydrogenase, then other enzymes involve glyceraldehyde 3-phosphate dehydrogenase, then glycerate dehydrogenase, formate dehydrogenase are some examples of Roseman fold. Okay, so they consist of NADP binding domain. Examples: lactate dehydrogenase, alcohol dehydrogenase, glyceraldehyde 3-phosphate dehydrogenase, then glycerate dehydrogenase, formate dehydrogenase are some examples with Roseman fold containing NAD binding domain. Now about the quaternary structure. So quaternary structure, if more than one polypeptide aggregate to form one functional protein, the spatial relationship between the polypeptide subunits is referred to as quaternary structure. Okay, so more than one polypeptide aggregate to form a functional protein, and the bonds involved in quaternary structure is also non-covalent bond. So more than one polypeptide is involved, and the configuration relationship between the amino acids, that is formed between the polypeptide subunits, is referred to as quaternary structure. So we know that insulin is a primary structure, though it consists of two polypeptide chains. Here the bonds involved in insulin is covalent. So insulin does not belong to quaternary structure. Okay, in quaternary structure it is a non-covalent bonds that is involved. Now coming to the bonds involved in the tertiary and quaternary structure, it's mainly non-covalent bonds. Non-covalent bonds like hydrophobic interactions, ionic bond, hydrogen bond, van der Waals forces are involved in tertiary and quaternary structure. Which is the major bond in secondary structure? In secondary structure it is mainly hydrogen bond. Okay, and in primary structure it is mainly covalent bonds like peptide bond and disulfide bonds. Whereas tertiary and quaternary structure consists of non-covalent interactions like ionic bond, hydrogen bond, van der Waals forces and hydrophobic bond. Okay, so these are the various bonds that is involved. The hydrophobic interaction, then the hydrogen bond, then the ionic bonds, the charge-to-charge interaction is there, and the van der Waals interaction. These are the weak forces involved. So till now we discussed about the various structure of proteins. Structures are primary, secondary, tertiary and quaternary. Now let's discuss a property of proteins, that is denaturation of proteins. So what do you mean by denaturation? As the name implies, when you denature the protein by adding a denaturing agents like acid, base or alcohol, a normal protein is converted to a denatured protein. The important point that you should remember is that primary structure is intact in denaturation. Primary structure is intact. But there is non-specific alteration in secondary, tertiary and quaternary structure. So non-specific alteration of secondary, tertiary and quaternary. Secondary, tertiary and quaternary is involved in the denaturation of proteins. Which are the denaturing agents? They can be acid, base, alcohol or any reducing agent, or treating with urea, salicylates. Treating with urea, salicylates. Then high pressure. Then vigorous shaking. Vigorous shaking are some of the denaturing agents. So here the primary structure is intact. Primary structure is intact and secondary, tertiary and quaternary structures are denatured. There is a loss of biological activity and they assume a random coil structure. They assume a random coil structure in denaturation. Now there are two types of denaturation. Which are the two types? It can be reversible denaturation. Reversible or irreversible. Okay, so denaturation can be reversible or irreversible. As the name implies, reversible denaturation means the denatured proteins are sometimes renatured when the physical agent is removed. So when the physical agent is removed, the denatured proteins can be reconstructed. They can be recalled to form the protein. Okay, so that is a reversible denaturation. And irreversible denaturation, even when the physical agent is removed, the denatured proteins are not renatured. Okay, so here the denatured proteins are not renatured in irreversible denaturation. An example is egg coagulation. Okay, egg coagulation is an example for irreversible denaturation. In reversible denaturation, when the physical agent is removed, the proteins are sometimes renatured and that is called reversible denaturation. So this diagram shows the coagulation of egg. So albumin heated is irreversibly denatured and this is heat coagulation, which is an example of irreversible denaturation. So heat coagulation, reversible for irreversible denaturation. So at first albumin was water soluble. On heating it forms a insoluble form. This is insoluble form of egg. Example for irreversible denaturation. So native albumin, denaturation and cross-linking. Okay. So denaturation can be both reversible and irreversible. The denaturing agents can be heat or treating with urea, salicylates, high pressure, vigorous shaking. These are some of the denaturing agents and there is loss of biological activity. The primary structure is intact in denaturation but secondary, tertiary, quaternary structures are lost. They form a random coil structure. So that is denaturation. Now we will discuss about the study of protein structure. How are the protein structure studied? Okay. So the methods of protein sequencing. The methods of protein sequencing. It can be end group analysis. End group analysis. Then other methods involved are mass spectrometry. Then other molecular biology techniques are also used. Molecular biology techniques are used to study the structure of protein. Okay, so study of primary structure for protein sequences, we use end group analysis. Then methods like mass spectrometry and molecular biology techniques are used for studying the structure of proteins. About the end group analysis. End group analysis. So as the name implies, end group analysis is analysis of end groups. That is analysis of the amino terminal and the carboxy terminal groups. Okay. So identification of this N-terminal amino acid. Identification of this N-terminal of amino acid is by Sanger's technique. Sanger's technique, and also Edman's degradation technique. Sanger's technique and Edman's degradation technique. Sanger's technique is by using Sanger's reagent. What is Sanger's reagent? That's a question for you. That is 1-fluoro-2,4-dinitrobenzene. 1-fluoro-2,4-dinitrobenzene is Sanger's reagent. Okay, and Edman's degradation technique is by using Edman's reagent. What is Edman's reagent? That is phenyl isothiocyanate. Phenyl isothiocyanate. Okay, so phenyl isothiocyanate is Edman's technique, and by using 1-fluoro-2,4-dinitrobenzene is the Sanger's technique. Analysis of the N-terminal of amino acid. Analysis of C-terminal of amino acid is by using carboxypeptidase. That's by using carboxypeptidase A and B. So analysis of C-terminal is by using carboxypeptidase A and B. So N-group analysis is the analysis of end groups, the amino terminal and the carboxy terminal groups. Carboxy terminal groups is analyzed by using carboxypeptidase A and B, and N-group analysis, N-terminal, can be analyzed by using Sanger's technique or the Edman's technique. Sanger's technique is by using the Sanger's reagent 1-fluoro-2,4-dinitrobenzene, and Edman's technique is by using phenyl isothiocyanate. So this was the Sanger's technique. This was the first technique to determine the sequence of protein. Okay, and the Sanger's reagent, as I just said, it is 1-fluoro-2,4-dinitrobenzene. 1-fluoro-2,4-dinitrobenzene is a Sanger's reagent. And the first protein to be sequenced is insulin. Okay, by this method, the first protein that was sequenced is insulin, and it was done by Frederick Sanger. And he got Nobel Prize in 1958. And in this case, only the dipeptides or tripeptides can be sequenced. By using Sanger's technique, only dipeptides or tripeptides can be sequenced. And the Sanger's reagent is 1-fluoro-2,4-dinitrobenzene. Okay, it is sequenced, and then electrophoresis chromatography is done, and partial hydrolysis is done, and this process is repeated. So it is for sequencing the N-terminal of amino acid 1-fluoro-2,4-dinitrobenzene is the Sanger's reagent, and only dipeptides or tripeptides can be sequenced by using this method. Edman's method, that's Edman's degradation technique. The Edman's reagent is phenyl isothiocyanate. It is phenyl isothiocyanate. It derivatizes the amino terminal of polypeptide. Okay, it derivatizes the amino terminal of polypeptide. And Edman's technique can sequence many residues of a single polypeptide. So this can sequence many residues, around 5 to 30 residues of a single polypeptide chain can be studied by using the Edman's technique. And unlike Sanger's sequence, it's not used to study the structure of proteins, but used to detect the sequence of amino acids in a polypeptide. So by labeling the amino terminal residue, then removing the first residue, labeling the second residue, removing the second residue. So it's mainly done for sequencing. It's used to study the sequence of amino acids. Okay. Edman's technique is used to study the sequence of amino acids and not the structure of proteins. It's used to study the sequence of amino acids. Now about the cleavage of polypeptide. How can you cleave the polypeptide chains? By using trypsin, chymotrypsin, you can cleave the polypeptide chains. And trypsin, trypsin cleaves the carboxy side of basic amino acids like lysine and arginine. Okay, so this is hydrolysis site for trypsin, and it cleaves the carboxy side of basic amino acids like lysine and arginine. About chymotrypsin cleaves the carboxy group of amino acids and aromatic amino acids, then bulky nonpolar amino acids like phenylalanine, tyrosine, and tryptophan. So carboxy terminal of these bulky amino acids like phenylalanine, tyrosine, tryptophan is done by chymotrypsin. And cyanogen bromide. Cyanogen bromide is specific for the cleavage of this bond of the methionine. Okay, carboxyl side of methionine. The carboxyl side of methionine is cleaved by cyanogen bromide. So cyanogen bromide, what does it do? it attacks the carboxyl site of methionine. So site of cleavage of polypeptide chains for trypsin, trypsin cleaves lysine arginine, chymotrypsin cleaves the bulky amino acids like phenylalanine tryptophan, cyanogen bromide cleaves the carboxyl side of methionine. So the steps of protein sequencing, the cleaved peptide. So step 1, we have to cleave the polypeptide to smaller fragments using trypsin, chymotrypsin or cyanogen bromide. Step 2, the shorter peptides are then sequenced by Edman sequencing. So Edman sequencing is for sequencing the amino acid. We are labeling the N-terminal amino acid and the Edman's reagent is phenyl isothiocyanate. Now about the mass spectrometers. So mass spectrometers, these are the method of choice for protein identification. Okay, mass spectrometers. You can see this is the diagram of a mass spectrometer, and here the proteins are analyzed and it's a digital display. It's used for protein identification. So identification of proteins by using mass spectrometry. The proteins undergo proteolytic digestion to form the peptides. Then using chromatography, they are separated and fragmented, and database searching, we can identify the peptide. So the principle used in mass spectrometry, they identify proteins based on the mass to charge ratio. Okay, so proteins are identified based on the difference in the mass to charge ratio, and the molecular mass of each amino acid is unique. So the sequence of peptide can be reconstructed from the masses of its fragments. Sequence of peptide. The sequence of peptide can be reconstructed from masses of its fragments. And exceptions are the molecular mass of leucine, isoleucine, then glutamine and lysine. Okay, so here in spectrometry, mass to charge ratio, the proteins are identified by a difference in their mass to charge ratio. This is mass spectrometry schematic view. So here the sample is placed, then the sample is ionized using various ionization sources. That is conversion from neutral and light to charged particles. The techniques used are electric ionization, laser desorption, plasma sources, high temperature filaments, electrospray. Then mass analyzer. They separate ions according to the difference in their mass to charge ratios. And various filters are used like quadruple mass filter, sector field instrument, time of flight analyzer, 2D or 3D ion trap, Orbitrap. So these filters are used for trapping the ions. Then detectors, various detectors like Faraday cups, electromultiplier, photomultiplier, electro-optical ion detector, charged coupled device. They measure the intensity of ion beams. So detector measure the intensity of ion waves and then data is acquired. So we get different proteins. The proteins are identified by the difference in their mass to charge ratio in mass spectrometry. The diagram of a quadruple mass spectrometer. So these spectrometers are generally used to determine the masses of molecules of 4000 Dalton or less. Okay. They are used to determine the masses of molecules of 4000 Dalton. So here the source and the filter and then the detector. So this is a diagram of a time of flight mass analyzer. Okay. The protein sample is ionized here. Then the electrical field accelerates the ions. Then the lightest ion arrives at the detector first. Okay. This laser triggers a clock and then it is recorded. Fine. So detector, the lighter ions arrive at the detector first. And they are used to determine large masses of complete proteins. So large masses of complete proteins more than 4000 Dalton. So up to 4000 we use quadruple mass filters. Then more than 4000 we use time of flight mass analyzer to determine the large masses. So this shows a diagram of tandem mass spectrometry. Tandem mass spectrometry, as the name implies, the two mass spectrometers are linked in series. Right? So it's called as MS-MS instrument. So sample, ionized, mass to charge separation, then this fragment, again another mass to charge separation, and then it is detected. Okay. So these are the various spectrometers. First one we saw was quadruple mass spectrometry, then time of flight mass spectrometry, and this is the tandem mass spectrometry used for protein identification. And the principle mainly used is the proteins are separated based on their mass to charge ratio. Now about the advantages of mass spectrometers. So this is the method of choice for protein determination. The method of choice for protein determination is mass spectrometry. Okay, the method of choice. And it is very sensitive and high very speed, and you can get the results very fast, and it's versatile, detect post-translational modifications. Okay, these are some of the advantages. They can detect post-translational modification also. And it's also used for other biomolecules, not just proteins. Other oligonucleotides, carbohydrates can also be identified by using mass spectrometry, because the mass and charge are common properties for all of these, right? So in mass spectrometers, the analytes are identified based on the difference in the mass to charge ratio, and it's very versatile and fast technique. Now let's see some of the techniques that used for study of secondary and tertiary structures. For studying the secondary structure, techniques like circular dichroism, you just have to remember the names, circular dichroism, then optical rotatory dispersion chromatography, are used. Okay, and also for studying the tertiary structure, we can use X-ray crystallography. Okay, X-ray, the protein sample crystals, the diffraction pattern, and 3D model. Okay, of proteins. So this is a technique called X-ray crystallography. Then NMR spectroscopy. That's another method of studying the tertiary structure of a protein. It's a sample tube, the magnetic controller, the magnetic field, detector, absorption. So here there is radio frequency transmit result. So the nuclear magnetic resonance spectroscopy. Then UV light spectroscopy, which is the most rapid method, is used for studying the tertiary structure. So UV light spectroscopy, a light source, there is a diffraction grating, and through the aperture the sample could finally detected. Then fluorescence spectroscopy. Okay, so it's a light, there is a filter, and the fluorescent and filter and detector. So fluorescence spectroscopy is used for studying the tertiary structure of proteins and also the molecular modeling. So these are other methods of studying the secondary and tertiary structure. We can use optical dichroism, then optical rotatory dispersion chromatography, and for studying tertiary structure, NMR spectroscopy, molecular modeling, fluorescence spectroscopy, UV light spectroscopy. UV light spectroscopy is the most rapid method. So just remember these names. These can be asked in exams. Now let's discuss the MCQs from this question. So first question. The linear sequence of amino acids in the polypeptide chain is referred to. What is the answer? Primary, secondary, tertiary, or quaternary? Answer is A. Primary structure. So that determines the linear sequence of amino acid. In secondary, the amino acids, secondary structure confines to the configured relationship of amino acids, which are 3 to 4 amino acids apart in linear sequence. So the folded and the geometrically ordered units of short segments of polypeptides is involved in the secondary structure. And tertiary structure, it refers to a 3D structure of a protein, when these secondary structure are arranged into larger functional units. And quaternary structure, the different types of polypeptides are arranged in a spatial manner. Okay, that's involved in the quaternary structure. So linear sequence of amino acids, that's referred to primary structure. Beta turns is an example for. It's an example for secondary structure. Answer is B. So other examples are alpha helix, then beta sheet, beta turn, or beta bends are all examples for secondary structure. The stabilizing bond for primary structure. We know the primary structure is stabilized by covalent bonds. The covalent peptide bonds. Other options are non-covalent bonds. So answer is A, peptide bond. So structure of primary structure. The linear sequence of amino acids. The bond stabilizing primary structure is the peptide bond. So this is the secondary structure. Mainly the bond involved is hydrogen bond. The main bond involved is hydrogen bond. Apart from that, other electrostatic interactions, ionic bonds are also involved. Then tertiary, it involves the three-dimensional structure of proteins, and the main bonds involved are the hydrophobic interactions. So hydrophobic interactions are the main bond involved in the tertiary structure, and in quaternary structure also the main bonds involved are the hydrophobic interactions. Okay, hydrophobic interactions, hydrogen and ionic bonds. So non-covalent bonds are involved in secondary, tertiary and quaternary structures, and the main bond involved in the primary structure is the peptide bond, which is covalent. Next question, the most common and stable conformation for a polypeptide chain is, it is alpha helix. Okay, so the most common and stable conformation for a polypeptide chain is alpha helix. Okay, so examples of proteins with major secondary structure as alpha helixes: hemoglobin, myoglobin. They consist of, they are quaternary structure proteins, and main structure involved is the alpha helix. Next question, alpha helix of a protein is most likely to be disrupted if a missense mutation introduces the following amino acid within the alpha helical structure. So this question is about the amino acids which disrupts the alpha helical structure, and the amino acids involved are proline, glycine. Okay, glycine induces bends. Glycine induces bends within the structure, and protein can insert kinks in the alpha helix. So they disrupt the alpha helix. So in the given option, answer is C, glycine. So alpha helix, you can see the hydrogen bonds are seen parallel to the peptide bonds. So hydrogen bond is seen parallel to the peptide bonds in alpha helix, and the main bond stabilizing alpha helix is hydrogen bond. Next question, the most abundant amino acid in beta terms. So in beta terms, the main amino acid involved is the proline. Proline is the most abundant, followed by glycine. Okay, in beta sheets, valine is involved. So valine is seen in beta sheets, and beta terms it is proline followed by glycine. Most abundant is proline. So answer is B. Next question, the proteins are linear polymers of amino acid. They fold into compact structures. Sometimes these folded structures associated for homo or heterodimers. Which of the following refers to this associated form? It is quaternary structure. Okay, quaternary structure has homodimers, meaning the two copies of same polypeptide chain, and heterodimers means two different polypeptide chain. Okay, example for a homodimer is D-amino acid aminotransferase. D-amino acid aminotransferase is an example for a homodimer, and heterodimer where two different polypeptide chains are involved. Examples are rab geranyl transferase. Rab geranyl transferase is an example for a heterodimer. All are true about denaturation except. So in denaturation, primary structure is not lost. Denaturation may be reversible. It mostly renders proteins insoluble. Biological property of protein is treated, which is the correct option. All are true except. So denaturation may be reversible. Yes, that is a true statement. It can be both reversible or irreversible. Mostly renders protein insoluble. That is also a true statement. Biological property of protein is retained. Is that a true statement? No, it is lost. Biological property is lost in denaturation. So that is the answer. Primary structure is not lost. That is also a correct statement. Only the secondary, tertiary and quaternary structure is lost. So here the answer is D. Roseman fold associated NADH domain is found in. So Roseman fold NADH domain that is seen in the family of oxidoreductase, and they share a common NADP binding domain. They contain NAD binding domain. So domain is a section of a protein structure which performs a particular function like binding of a substrate. So among the given options, it is alcohol dehydrogenase as this Roseman fold. Other examples are lactate dehydrogenase, then also glyceride dehydrogenase. Okay, these are other examples for Roseman fold. Lactate dehydrogenase, then glyceraldehyde 3-phosphate dehydrogenase, then 6-phosphogluconate dehydrogenase, then D-glycerate dehydrogenase are other examples for Roseman folded NADH domain. All the following can determine protein structure except, okay, mass spectrometry, yes, that is a method of choice for protein identification. X-ray crystallography, yes, used for determining tertiary structure. NMR spectrometry, yes, another example for determining tertiary structure. High performance liquid chromatography, so that is the answer. It's not used for determining protein structure, it's used for separation purification and identification. Okay, they cannot determine the protein structure. So here the answer is HPLC. Sanger's reagent is chemically, it's a common question. It is 1-fluoro-2,4-dinitrobenzene used for N-group analysis. That is Sanger's technique. In forming 3D structure, the following factors help. So 3D structure of a protein is formed by the sequence of amino acid in the primary structure. So amino acid sequences, interaction between the polypeptide, that also helps in the three-dimensional structure. Then chaperones, that helps in the protein folding. So thus it helps in 3D structure. Then side chains. Okay, so the interaction between side chains is important, but peptide bond is involved in the primary structure. Okay, so that is not the answer. The B, C, D, E, these are the correct answers. Amino acid sequence, the interaction between polypeptide side chains, chaperones, they helps in the protein folding side chain. So these factors help in the forming 3D structure of a protein. So that's about the discussion of the various structure of proteins as well as the method of identification of protein structure. So all the best for your exams. Believe in yourself and do your best.